Hello Matrix, and welcome to our final lesson on perfect markets. I've set you a test based solely on perfect markets. The previous video focused solely on section A of the test, while this video focuses solely on section B. So let's kick off with section B. Section B will commence with 2 short questions worth 2 marks each. That will then give you a total of 4 marks. The first question usually requires you to provide 2 examples, and those 2 examples are worth 1 mark each, which will obviously give you a total of 2 marks. And the second question will be more factually orientated. Remember, grade 12s, that when you are required to provide a fact, that every fact is worth 2 marks. What constitutes a fact? A fact is when you provide a comprehensive sentence about the topic that you are discussing. Once the question appears before you, grade 12s, please pause the video, complete the answers, and I will then go through the answers with you. So let's work through question 2.1. The first question says, provide 2 examples of variable costs. Remember, grade 12s, variable costs are costs that change as your production output changes. So I've given you the examples of salary, wages, advertising, electricity, stock. Where you see the words accept suitable, it means that you might not have the exact same answers as what I have, but that does not make your answers incorrect. Maybe you said fuel costs and stationery costs. Those are absolutely correct. They might not be on the memo, but they are still absolutely correct. The next question says, why do mergers and acquisitions compromise the economy? Mergers and acquisitions compromise the economy, grade 12s, because it reduces the number of suppliers within the economy and therefore gives the consumer less choice. Again, your answer might not read exactly as mine, but that does not make it incorrect. If the gist of your answer is more or less the same as mine, that is absolutely fine. So now we move on to question 2.2. Question 2.2 and question 2.3 are worth 10 marks each. They will either be based on a graph or a table or an article or a cartoon. Once the question appears, grade 12s, please pause the video, complete the answers, and I will then go through the answers with you. So let's work through the graph. The question says, study the graph alongside and answer the questions that follow. The first thing that we will notice about this graph is that our average costs lie below the average revenue, and that clearly indicates to us that we have, of course, made an economic profit. We also know that economic profits can only be made in the short run. So, the first question says, which market structure is depicted in the graph alongside? We of course know that that is the perfect market. The next question says, provide the appropriate details for B. B is of course the dam rule, which is of course demand is equal to average revenue, which is equal to marginal revenue. The next question says, explain why the demand curve is perfectly elastic in the above graph. That's my elastic demand curve. I know that it is perfectly elastic because the price stays the same irrespective of the quantity demanded, and that causes it to be perfectly elastic. The next question says, briefly describe the term profit maximization for 2 marks. Profit maximization is when the firm is able to sell a good or service at a price where the difference between the total revenue and total cost is the greatest. Alternatively, you could also have said, profit maximization occurs when the firm's marginal revenue is equal to its marginal costs. The last question is worth 4 marks, grade 12s, and it requires a calculation. It says, calculate the profit or the loss in the above graph. Show all calculations. We've already established that a profit is being earned. There are 2 ways that we can calculate it. We can either say the total revenue minus the total cost. Alternatively, we can say the average revenue minus the average cost, and then we can multiply it by the quantity. Let's do the total revenue minus total cost method first. So we're going to say average revenue times by quantity, and that will of course give us a total of 1,650. Then we're going to look at our total costs. We're going to say 15 Rand times by 75 Rand. That will give us a total of 1,125 Rand. 1,650 Rand minus 1,125 Rand will give us an answer of 525 Rand. The alternative method, where we say average revenue minus average cost times by quantity, is of course 22 Rand minus 15 Rand, which is 7 Rand. 7 Rand times by 75 Rand, which will give us an answer of 525 Rand. Different methods, exactly the same answer. Question 2.3, again a 10 marker based on a graph, article, table, cartoon. Once the question appears, grade 12s, please pause the video, complete the answers, and I will then go through the answers with you. So question 2.3 was based on an article about the role of the Competition Commission. The Competition Commission was called in to investigate a case in Boksburg where a pharmacy was penalized after it was discovered that they were placing 150% markup on face masks. Now remember, grade 12s, that the role of the Competition Commission is to protect the consumer. And so this article clearly highlights the role of the Competition Commission. So let's go through our questions. The first one says, which institution investigates irregular competition practices? Is of course the Competition Commission. Provide an example of an essential good other than face masks. I've got food, toiletries, healthcare. You might have different examples. They might be absolutely correct. The next question says, briefly describe the role of the Competition Commission. The role of the Competition Commission is to investigate any restrictive business practices and abuse of market power. This is to ensure that consumers are not compromised in any way. This is particularly true, grade 12s, if the good or service being supplied is an essential good, because then that makes the consumer even more dependent on it. The next question says, explain the economic significance of the following statement. And therefore, we continue to intervene and to make sure that those that are doing wrong, they're obviously referring to suppliers who charge exorbitantly high prices, that they correct their ways and that consumers are not cheated. Cheated referring to the fact that consumers are not being charged excessively high prices, because that therefore allows the company to make excessively high profits, but it obviously compromises the consumer. So, the Competition Commission can be regarded as a watchdog, absolutely. Their role is to protect the consumer by ensuring that suppliers do not charge inflated or higher prices, thereby excluding certain consumers and thereby preventing them from having access to certain goods and services. The last question says, for 4 marks, explain the role of the Competition Tribunal and Competition Appeal Court. Each of these are worth 2 marks. So, the role of the Competition Tribunal is to allow or reject the investigation and recommendation made by the Competition Commission, and the role of the Competition Appeal Court, grade 12s, is to review decisions made by the Competition Tribunal and to amend or confirm these decisions. That then brings us to the end of our 2 10 markers, and we move on to our 2 8 markers. The first 8 marker, grade 12s, is a more straightforward one, which requires you to explain or discuss a concept or to draw and explain a concept with the aid of a graph. Again, once the question appears, please pause the video, complete your answer, and I will then go through the answer with you. So let's see what question 2.4 asks for. Use a graph of total costs and total revenue to explain profit maximization in a perfect market. Remember that there's two ways in which we can explain profit maximization, using either the marginal revenue and marginal cost technique, alternatively the total revenue and total cost technique, which is clearly what this question asks for. At this stage, grade 12s, I'd like to provide you with some general tips and advice regarding the 8 markers in general. You will notice on the marking grid that 4 marks are assigned for the correct positioning and labeling of the total revenue and total cost curves. So please, grade 12s, whenever you are drawing a graph, please ensure that you position and label your curves as accurately as possible. 6 marks have been allocated in total for the drawing of the graph. So it is very possible that you can make a mistake on the graph. Let's just say, for example, that you forgot to indicate the profit maximization, and therefore you only earn 4 marks for the drawing of the graph. But if your explanation of the graph is on point, then you can still earn 4 marks for the explanation, 4 marks for the drawing of the graph, and therefore obtain the maximum of 8 out of 8. With regards to the explanation of the graph, you will also notice that 3 facts have been allocated to the memo. So the memo does in fact allow you some leeway with the drawing of the graph and the explanation. You could leave something out and yet still earn the maximum of 8 out of 8. My advice to you, grade 12s, is always provide as many accurate, not inaccurate, facts as what you possibly can. And if you are able to, please provide examples to complement your answer. So let's unpack this particular question. We know that 4 marks have been assigned to the correct positioning and labeling of the total cost and total revenue curves. We also know that 2 marks have been indicated for the profit maximization. The explanation says the firm will make a profit between points A and points B, where the total revenue exceeds the total cost. Profit is maximized where the gap between the total revenue and the total cost is the greatest. This occurs at Unit 4, where the total cost is 30 Rand and the total revenue is 40 Rand. Let's move on to question 2.5. The second 8 marker, question 2.5, is what we call a higher order question. It requires more critical thinking and analysis. So please, grade 12s, make sure that you read your question properly and answer it in context of the question. Once the question appears, please pause the video, complete your answer, and I will then go through it with you. So the question says, without the aid of a graph. If you draw a graph, remember I said to you, answer your question in context of what is required. If you draw a graph, you will earn no marks for it. Explain why the price of a product under perfect competition will be equal to the lowest point on the long run average cost curve. This question, grade 12s, is referring to the long run equilibrium position. The long run equilibrium position is where the firm makes a normal profit. So you have to explain the answer in context of what occurs when an economic profit happens and what occurs when an economic loss happens. So let's start off with economic profit. When a firm is making an economic profit in the short run, it will act as a signal for more firms to join the industry. Absolutely. This will therefore increase the supply in the market and thereby decrease economic profit to normal profit. The long run equilibrium is achieved where the lowest point of the average cost curve is tangent to the demand, average revenue and marginal revenue curve, which indicates normal profit. When a firm is making an economic loss, it will act as a signal for firms to leave the industry, as no firm can sustain indefinite economic losses. We definitely know that. This will cause the supply to decrease and for economic losses to now become normal profit. The long run equilibrium is achieved where the lowest point of the average cost curve is tangent to the demand, average revenue, marginal revenue curve, indicating normal profit. You will notice on the memo, grade 12s, that in fact 6 facts are allocated and you are only required to provide 4 facts. So that means that an additional 2 facts are provided, which means that you could leave something out and yet still obtain the maximum mark for it. That then brings us to the end of section B. You will always be tested for 40 marks in section B. In a final examination, you will be required to answer 2 40-mark questions in section B. That effectively brings us to the end of our series of videos on the perfect market. Thank you very much for your company.
Check out the video description below for practice questions from our study guides. If you found this video useful, give it a like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any new episodes. Follow us on Instagram or Facebook to stay on top of the latest TAS news and launches. So that's it for now from the Answer Series, your key to exam success.